right, today we're going to solve after we factor. We're going to get these polynomial equations done with. So, how do I know when to factor and when to solve? Okay, you only solve when you have an equal sign. So, only when there is an equal sign. Okay, if you have an equal sign, that means you have to get the variable completely alone. Whereas when you factor, there's no equal sign. There's no equal sign. Okay, you will have to know the difference, okay? And the difference is that equal sign, and every year I have students that will solve when they don't have to, or they're only factor when they're supposed to go all the way and solve it. So just be real cognizant about that. Make sure you know if you are solving or if you are factoring, okay? So let's look at number one. So first thing, are we solving or are we factoring? Look at that guy right there. See him? That means solve. So the first thing you want to do is factor, but then we're going to have more steps to take after that. Now don't be frightened by these problems. Just because it's to the fourth power, it's not a big deal. It's going to be like the earlier factoring problems when it was to the second power. So I'm going to do the same thing here with guess and check. 1 and 1 gives me 1. What gives me 12? 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. So those things give me 12, and what I want to do is I want to set up some parentheses. Now, when I set up these parentheses, I want to make sure that whatever I put in the front, when I multiply, it gives me x to the fourth power. Well, x times x, back in the day we'd do this, x times x. If I multiply these two together, I get x squared. Alright, I want x to the fourth. That's the man that I want right now. So what you're going to have to do is square both of these. Okay, now when I multiply these, I get x to the fourth, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Alright, so we have those there. We have already said that there are going to be ones in front with them. And then we go ahead and try our list. Now I tend to work from the bottom up. I'm going to write 3 and 4 here first. Let's check this out. So we have 3x squared. Here we have 4x squared. Is that going to give me my 8x squared? No. Did not work. Not going to use that one right there. So I'm just going to kind of cross that out. What if I flip-flop them? Well, if I flip-flop them, I have the exact same thing since these guys in the front are already the same. Okay, so don't even bother to flip-flop them. It would be the exact same combination. So instead, let's just try the next one on our list. So the next one on the list is a 2 and a 6. So I'm going to put a 2 and a 6 here, and I'm going to check that. So this is 2x squared. And this is 6x squared. Now remember, if I'm going too fast, you can pause the video and you can write down whatever you need to write down. I do recommend that you don't fast forward the video and write down everything I have on my screen and not listen to the sound at all, because I think that's really wacky, and I don't know why people would do that and then think they should understand the lesson. But anyway, I digress. Let's just keep going here because that worked, right? That was 8x squared. We got the guy that we were looking for right there. So now that we have that, let's figure out the signs. Well, it's positive at the end here, so they both have to be positive or both negative. You want them to add to be 8. So these are the two guys that you need. Now we do have to solve, right? So this is where students end up making a mistake. They forget to solve it all the way. So let's go ahead and let's solve this. We take the x squared. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, always see if you can factor further. I knew I couldn't because when we have two terms, I would be looking for the difference of squares, and difference means subtract, and in both of these sets of parentheses we have addition going on. So I knew that I couldn't go any further with it. Alright, so we're going to set each one of these equal to 0, and we're going to solve them. So we would subtract over here. And how do we get rid of a square? How do we get rid of something squared? We take the square root, right? And the one thing that I've noticed in the past students forget is that beautiful plus or minus. Poor little dude gets left out. So make sure you do write the plus or minus. And anytime we see a negative underneath a radical, what should we be writing? An I, because I is the square root of -1. Okay, so here is the first set of answers. Okay, on the next one we're going to subtract 6 from both sides, and then we're going to take the square root there. Now when you take the square root, remember the plus or minus. Don't forget the plus or minus. And then anytime we see this negative underneath the radical, again, we're going to write I. And 6 doesn't have any pairs in it. It doesn't get any prettier than that, so we just leave it the way it is. So check this out. We have 4 answers, and we have a 4th power here. So in case you're ever wondering, you should have as many answers as you have as the highest power, okay? So I have 4 answers. This is to the 4th power. I am good to go. So let's look at number 2. On number 2, I see a GCF, and I know a lot of students forget to look for the GCF, and here's the deal. If you are solving and you forget your GCF, you will get the same answers. However, when you're solving, the numbers will be larger, and it will be more difficult to factor. And what I have seen in my experience of teaching, people don't like big numbers when they're factoring. So try to pull out that GCF here. So I'm noticing that there is a 4 that can divide evenly into all of this, and also an x squared. So once I do that, x to the 4th minus 5 x to the 2nd plus 6 equals 0. Now notice this equals 0, so you're going to have to factor it and then actually solve it. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to finish this one, because check it out. Isn't it almost identical to number 1? I mean, it's x to the 4th. I mean, it's just factoring. So I think that you can finish this one. Please remember too what I said. How many answers should you get? Now some of them might be repeats, but you should have 6 answers, right? So go ahead and you finish this one for class. Bring that in. You could pause it now, finish it, or you could wait to the end and work it out then, whatever you wish. So let's go down here to number 3. Number 3 is our GCF. Nothing divides evenly into both of those, so no GCF at all. So we can't pull anything out. So the next thing we look at, we have 2 terms here, so you want to see, is it the difference of squares? And it is the difference of squares, because 25 is a perfect square, and so is 36. Okay, so what we're going to do, I tend to do this, even though it's not really mathematically correct, but basically what you're doing is taking the square root, since if you were to check your answer, it would be a term times itself. So what we're going to have here then is, I notice that equals 0 is there, right? So that means you're going to solve it. So make sure you solve it. So this is going to be 5, 5, 6, 6. And then I have students, they'll usually just stare at it kind of right here. And it's because of that x to the 4th, right? But we just discussed this. If it was an x squared, you would write an x and an x here, right? Because 5x times 5x would have been 25x squared. But this is not x squared, right? This is actually x to the 4th. So we're going to do x to the 2nd and x to the 2nd. Now when we're doing difference of squares, there's no middle term, right? And the reason there's no middle term is because the symbols inside the parentheses are opposites of each other. So plus and minus. Now a lot of students stop here. They get so excited that they got this far, they stop, but don't do that, because it does have an equal sign to it. So 5x squared plus 6 equals 0. Subtract the 6 from both sides. 5x squared equals negative 6. Divide by 5. I have so many students I've seen that they want to just take that square root right away. Don't. You don't have the x squared alone yet. You have to get it alone first. So we have x squared equals negative 6 over 5. Okay, now we take the square root of it. So don't forget, when you do take the square root, it's going to be plus or minus, and it's going to be negative 6 over 5 like this. I do see a negative right here, so I do want to pull this out. So I root 6 over root 5. Now, here we could rationalize the denominator, but sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't. I tend to like to rationalize the denominator as a teacher, so I'm going to show you how to do that. It's yucky to have a radical in the denominator, right? We've learned that in the past in Algebra 1. So plus or minus I root 30 over, this would be the square root of 25, and the square root of 25 is 5. So there are 2 answers right there, okay? 5x squared minus 6 equals 0. We're going to have to solve this too. So we add the 6 to both sides, so 5x squared equals 6. Remember, we're getting the x squared alone. We have to get that alone before we can take any square roots. So x squared equals 6 over 5. Again, now we can take that square root, and hopefully you will not forget the plus or minus, right? And we have plus or minus root 6 over 5, and I can break this up. I can say it's root 6 over root 5, and then we multiply the top and bottom by the bottom. That'll rationalize it. And you should always check to see if it could go any further, if you could simplify it, if there are any pairs underneath the radical, but there's not. We're good to go. And I do want to point something out, like check that out. Fourth power, look how many answers. 4 answers, right? So you know that you've grabbed them all, you've got all those answers. It is good to go. So I would like you to try this one because it's, seriously, I mean, come on. It's just like the last one, right? You're going to do great. You're going to get an A+ when you do this one, bring it to class. So you can pause and do it now. You could do it in the video. Honestly, I mean, I'd be watching the video all the way through the first time and then going back a second time and actually writing everything down. So, I mean, that's my tip. That's how I learned. Maybe that's how you learned, but I mean, some people need the tip, some don't. So let's talk about number 5. Remember what I said about GCF. It's just going to make your life easier. I mean, straight up. It's going to make your life easier. Let's just get this GCF out of here. So 2 goes into both, and also an x. So we're going to factor those guys out of there. So if I factor those out, I have x to the 4th minus 9 equals 0. I'm not done. I mean, I guess you could try to solve that, but, you know, do you want to do a 4th root, really? Is that what you want to do? No. Okay, so I see the difference of squares right here. So this 2x, don't throw him away. He's not garbage, okay? And people, you know, they do magic tricks and they get rid of things that shouldn't be gotten rid of. So don't throw him away. He's still there, okay? And we're going to go ahead and factor this one right here. We've already discussed how these will be x squareds now that we have x to the 4th. And then the square root of 9 would be 3. And then it's plus or minus plus, you know, whatever floats your boat. Both of those would be right. Now, check it out. We have 3 things to set equal to 0. 3 of them. So we have 2x equals 0. We have x squared plus 3 equals 0. We have x squared minus 3 equals 0. And we solve all of these. So when I solve this one, I get x equals 0. Boom. Over here, x squared will equal negative 3. How do we get rid of a square? Square root it. So x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 3. There's a negative underneath the radical. Don't leave it there. So x equals plus or minus I root 3. Boom. Done with that guy. And then over here, we have to add the 3, right? So x squared equals 3. How do you get rid of that square? You gotta square root it. So x equals plus or minus root 3. And really, you can't do anything else with that guy. Now, let's point out a little something here. 5th power, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 answers. So you know you got them all. You got all of them, okay? Just make sure that GCF, whatever it is, you set it equal to 0 also. Now, sometimes there'll be like an extra extraneous factor there, and it won't mean anything to your problem. Those are factors that don't have an x in it or a variable in it. But in this case, we had it, so we did count it as a solution. So anyway, that about wraps it up. So when you solve, you got to factor it and then take it all the way and get your variable alone. Make sure you do have these other 2 problems here done whenever you come to class, and, you know, bring any questions you have too. It has been fabulous teaching you today. I will see you in class.